Hey guys, you're listening to the Energy of the Untamed Heart podcast, where we talk about uncaging your divinely gifted wild heart to be as free and expansive as you were born to be. My goal is to use our stories, guest interviews, and your questions to tease out what has been keeping your wild heart under wraps. I'm your host, Mielle Fox, and together we will shatter the myths of our old stories to set our wild heart free. So thanks for choosing you and showing up today. I'm giggling because my friend Liz Perlin O'Hara has come to join me, and I'm giggling because we were talking about how common it is to have multiple people with the same name, and it gets very confusing when you're doing things like going for library cards or trying to set up your phone account or anything of that nature. So today my guest is Liz Perlin O'Hara, and she is a Reiki instructor master as well as an art aficionado, having left a long-term career in the arts and education. And she's going to share some of her story of how she kind of had the big wake up and has come to find her new passion and new joy over the last few years to help other people find theirs. So without any further ado, Liz, welcome. Tell us a little bit. What's up? What's up? So the listeners who you don't know, Liz is actually a New Englander, Northeast side of the country, but we are gathering today. She's on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast. So we had a little, let's line up the time zones. So tell us what dragged you from the East Coast to the West Coast, because that's a big journey.
Yeah, okay, so it didn't happen overnight, right? I guess this has kind of happened for a number of other people around this time, but I guess you could sort of call me a digital nomad if you want to use that phrase. And we felt like we had sort of landed where we were living sort of by accident. We didn't really have any family connection or really long-term roots in the last place that we were living. We decided that there's a whole big country here. If we were going to take a chance and go for an adventure, this was the time to do it. My oldest son, when we left about a year ago, was 15, and my youngest was not yet a year old. So we thought, if we're going to do this as a family, we're going to do it now. And we haven't quite landed. We were talking about this before too. We haven't quite landed somewhere yet, but that's the next step in our journey, is to sort of consciously decide where we want to live instead of like accidentally ending up somewhere. That
Right.
makes sense.
So yes, it does. But it's so funny because I really feel like whether you just land or you think that you're just landing, I really feel like there's a predestined method to how do you get where you're going for whatever that reason is. And my guess is you started in one place for what you believe was a particular reason, and then the shift came about with the need to redirect. Did you find that? Because I noticed in your bio you had a long time in the education system, in the arts, and now you are digitally recreating.
The nice thing about that is it sort of got me reflecting on some of things that maybe in the beginning of my healing career I would talk about often, but that I hadn't sort of thought about in a couple of years or in a while. I use this phrase like, I feel like I was pushed out. It's like sort of like, if the universe tells you something and you don't listen, they're just gonna sort of like, they're not just going to be like, oh, okay, well, I guess she didn't listen. Like, there's going to be something else that sort of pushes you. You know what I mean?
Get the message
And
until you get the message.
yeah, and I guess I was like a sort of a stubborn case, right? I love teaching and admire the work that teachers do. Like I told you, I was in the same school for 18 years teaching art, and then for a few more years in another school after that. So I spent over 2 decades in the classroom. But I really knew when we started moving, like I told you, we moved from Connecticut and so on. Eventually I was going to be transitioning to something else. I sort of already knew that. And I remember sort of in my mind when I at one point saying like, okay, I'm going to teach for 3 more years. I don't know where that came from, but I had in my mind, I'm going to teach for 3 more years. And then at the end of the 3 years is when I got really sick. That was sort of not the first touch point in my sort of venture into energetic healing, but it was sort of like the fuel on the fire, I guess you could say, that made me say, okay, I have to sort of like turn my direction and go this way. I correlate the two because I had Lyme disease. Okay. And I can talk more about that journey later, but if we get to it. But showing up every day and having trouble walking and moving, from classroom to classroom. It was during the pandemic. There was a lot of different shifts happening at that time, just even walking around the room. That's when really I started to think, okay, like I know that I'm not meant to be doing this anymore. And I'm meant to be, it's not because there's anything wrong with it. It's just that I've been called to do something else. But that was the thing that said, I go to these practitioners, I admire what they do. I started doing modalities that I would like participate in what they were doing. I was like, but it's time. Like I have to figure out how to heal. And I really love being a part of this healing world. I like took the plunge and I just started like getting certified in a ton of things. I just like, it was my thing. And actually, when I first started, I remember when I graduated from this one particular course, there was like a business aspect, and I'd had people were like, you should do art therapy and combine it with the healing work. And I had this like, no, I was a teacher, I was an artist, and now I'm a healer. Like in my mind, there was this sort of like, no, we're in this new chapter. And then about a year ago, I actually started creating these images with the energy that I was receiving. And now I'm doing these recordings and so on. And it's almost like I'm, it's almost like the same pattern as the first time when I was like 18, 19, 20 years old. Like I almost feel like that creative unfolding is happening like with a similar, I can't explain it, but a similar, okay, this thing leads me to that thing. And it feels similar. It doesn't, it feels like it's happened before, even though it's a totally different thing, if that makes sense.
It does make sense because for the listeners, we all know how weirdo, sciencey, geeky I am. It has happened before. You have walked the path already because even though our humanness in 3D is like, oh, here's my lifetime, here's my time frame, the reality is that we don't have just this lifetime and just this time frame. We actually exist in multiple, call them time sequences that are existing in the moment in multiple dimensions. So if that makes any sense from the quantum world, yeah, you've already actually done the thing that you believe you're doing for the second time because of the
Right.
way time space continuum is literally like all jumbo mumbo. Um, but it's so interesting to me. So did you take your certifications and start your spiritual path and your healing modality journey prior to leaving education, or did that occur when you kind of got the kick in the butt that said, all right, this Lyme's kicking your ass here, you need to do something?
Right. So actually started doing the certifications before I left the classroom. This is just because I knew that it was time for me to do something else. But truthfully, I had gone through a lot of releasing, reorganizing, and I felt myself shifting. And I thought to myself, if I go back to the classroom, I'm going to get sick again. Like I felt that. Like, you know what I'm saying? I felt that it would sort of put me back in that energy that I had just sort of, I'd already changed directions and now I'd be like, and so I know a lot of people do both for a really long time. And I did both for a short time. And then I felt called to just like declare it.
I think what you describe energetically is the discovering of turning in to yourself, turning inward in order to create your personal healing journey became more present and available, like in your face, so to speak, when you had the message coming from your deepest piece of you saying, don't go back into the classroom because that's not serving your highest good. That's not going to serve you physically. And the truth be told, we all know perfectly well that our physical being is a collection of our energetic being in a human form, where pretty much energy in a cellular clump that we like to call human body. So I think it's really fascinating that during your healing journey to heal through your Lyme event, that turning inward also made it very clear to you that what needed to be done was an inside job versus an outside job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're talking about this. There's a couple things that sort of come to mind to me, and I don't know if they're off topic, but if I can share. And I don't say this with sort of any like I'm so noble, because it really, I left for me. But there were moments where I felt like, and I'm not saying I didn't do a good job in the classroom, but there was this like 25-year-old version of me who, like, my whole life, like, my classroom was my first home and my home was my second home, you know. And I'd sometimes sort of be in there and think like, I wish my students had that, my current students had that teacher, because it wasn't that I wasn't performing, but I just remembered what it felt like to just love something so much. And so part of it with going into this healing was, when I was working with clients, it was the same feeling as when I was 23, 24, 5 years old. And it's like, I just love this so much. It's just feeding me in a way. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
It's a really valid
Um,
point you bring up. I think the key to unlocking how our heart speaks to us is to follow your passion, to feel that sense that you describe as your 25-year-old self, that through your art, then it was very fulfilling and very passionate for you and really spoke to you at a very deep level. And I think your point is so valid because it's very possible in one's lifetime on earth, you're going to have more than one passion. You're going to have more than one thing that feeds your soul. And that just like we walk a journey that changes depending on our choices, I see there's absolutely the capacity to either hold more than one passionate thing that you love to do, or have the one thing shift and change and pivot as the other parts of your life shift and change and pivot. And I don't think it's right
mhm,
or wrong or a one and done or a black and white. My passion for what do I do when I'm not doing this is to spend time on my farm with my horses. When I have time with my horses, it is literally like breathing for me. It is so much connection for me, and it fulfills every piece of my being to a level that's really hard to describe. And it really doesn't matter what I'm doing. It's just to be in that presence with them. But what else do
mhm,
I'm passionate about this. I'm very passionate about this podcast. I'm passionate about bringing the message forward to the collective about remove all the stories you've been telling yourself, tap deep within, remove the blocks to your heart, expand and live the life that you are meant to live. Be a beacon of receivership, all the things. And
mhm,
so I honestly use our stories that you and I are sharing, our insights, our reflections to bring that message. And I'm very
yeah.
passionate about that. There's a lot of things. So I think your observation of how did it feel at 25 and how does it feel now? I can't imagine it would feel the same way because you're not the same individual. Your
Right.
soul is the same, but your human has evolved as it should.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So tell us what
And
you're up
then,
to now.
yeah, so it's actually, I love how you just said everything that you just said. So it took me a while. So in the process of doing, of learning, opening, awakening, whatever you want to say. I was given the gift of light language. And I was even just listening to like a call, like a group call that I did within the past year. And I could hear how tentative I am about speaking it in front of people. When I started doing these recordings, I would record them as still images. And so what I would do is I would use a dim light, usually early in the morning, like 5 o'clock, so I could be outside, but sometimes not. And I would use my hands and lights, which I actually still do. I'll get to that in a second. I would speak light language, and it was so free because I was alone, right? And I would record these images, and then within the images is like this transmission from the divine universe. I could do them specifically for intentions that people would set, like a healing. Sometimes I was called to like bring an energy here, and I would do it that way, and I still do that. What I'm really excited about now is that I have somehow cleared that like timid part of myself wasn't fully owning this gift, right? Because that's how I feel. I feel this that way. Now I'm actually doing video recordings, and I still use the same techniques, but I'm speaking. And it's funny. It's like I put English words in there too as they're given to me, but it's like almost like if you speak two different language and you try to translate a joke to somebody back into English and it's not funny because it's not the native, it's like that. It's like I have to say both because the message isn't quite the same, but you can perceive it and understand it and receive it, even though you don't know what you can't, like your brain doesn't understand it. And so I actually was thinking about this too. Like there's this collective group of people who are really trying to shift the energy, or I'll say called to shift the energy of the earth, right? Which is like a massive task, especially if you're a healer. Like most of the people I work with, it just happens to be so, are other healers. So I feel like that has an impact in a way, because if I'm helping them and then they're helping others. In fact, I'll just say I had a client. This is one of my best testimonials. I just think this is so cool. So I'll just say this. I don't know how this is going to be perceived, but I'm just going to share it. So I had somebody come to me, and I asked her what made her decide to come to me. And she said, well, I'm working with this healer so-and-so, and all of a sudden the sessions were so different. So I asked what was different. And he told me that he had been working with you. And so she was transformed by his work. And then, she was at the beginning of her journey now. I mean, she's just exploded since then. And I don't take credit for that, but I'm just saying, like, the energy, like he could feel the shift in the healing work that he could do. And she picked up on it enough to say, I mean, that to me is like, I don't care what anybody writes on my wall or anything like that.
What I love and what I hear you say, and again, this is also a thread that I speak a lot about on the podcast and in other places and spaces that I exist in on social and the whole thing, is quite honestly, the language is energy. And that means it doesn't come to us in English or Spanish or Persian or I don't know, whatever. It doesn't even necessarily come in astrology or numerology or art or dance or whatever. There's no one specific language that fits everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that for you, your language is through light work, and through that makes, again, here's the science part of me, complete and utter total sense, because light is what it is through a particular frequency or vibration of energy that makes it show up as what we perceive as the color. But the reality is it's energy coming through. And so you, like I happen to be a translator of numbers, you're a translator of light energy, the messaging from divine through, you're the conduit or the translator to take that energetic expression and bring it forward for your clients in a way that makes it so that they can understand what is the message. And I just think
Yeah.
it's so beautiful that everybody has a different way of bringing it in. And we all have a different way, not only of receiving the message, but also of hearing back to ourselves, reflected from our heart, back out to our human, what the message is through what brings us joy and passion and expansion, however that may
Mm,
be. So it's this back and forth. I kind of view it like, oh, I don't know, like let's say you're in a room and you have a whole bunch of people from all different countries, and no one individual necessarily speaks all the languages of all the people in the room, but somehow between translations of different languages and body energy and physical movement and doodling on a piece of paper, you can have this amazing conversation and everybody gets it.
right.
And so this
Right.
is kind of what how I perceive, how do we as humans receive our messaging from beyond the 3D through other humans, through healers, through light workers, through whatever category name you want to put to the folks who are doing this to bring an energetic up leveling or uplifting or increasing the collective energetic frequency. And my phrase for
Yeah.
it is I feel, I'm not going to necessarily tap 8 billion people in one whack. That ain't happening. But I
Right.
sure might be shifting one heart at a time. So when I shift one, it's going to ripple to the next and the next and the next. And somebody's going to get more from it. And then they're going to push it out. And that to me is how are we going to impact the collective? Each one of us is
Right.
going to do our part. Yeah.
So I was resistant. People had told me this for a while, and I actually started an Etsy shop because I actually believe that these images and these sounds, like they, I don't know how I want to say this. I don't want to get too like sciencey on it because I do have like the analytical part of my mind, but I feel like I actually asked for this and then I was given the answer. It's like I feel like the sound and the light and the images sort of, but like our conscious mind sort of messes with us quite a bit, right? And so like doing it through images for me is a way to like bring this energy or this sort of activation or these new sort of forms of love that we may not as humans be familiar with here. And so just by like having these images in the world, whether it's, on online or on physical objects, like they just exist as this energy. And I know that sounds kind of wonky. It's a form of spreading it. It's a
It
form of
is.
like coming in, and now it can go where it needs to go. Like, so I feel like that's another way, aside from working with healers who are then going and impacting other people who may also be healers and so on, right? There's just sort of like a way of like bringing the energy to our plane, I guess you could say. Like that for me, that's kind of exciting. And I feel like I'm kind of just at the beginning of it. Like I said, I started about a year ago. So I'm still playing with it and exploring where it's going to go, but I'm kind of excited about it.
Absolutely. The curiousness, the curiosity is what it's tapping into the well of creativity. So when
Mhm.
you open yourself up to what else is available, what is possible, how would you like me to bring this message through and be open to how that message can be received and then brought through you and expressed? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Tell people how we can
Yeah.
find you because you are just a wealth of amazingness, really.
Oh, thank you. So I'm on Facebook and YouTube at okay, so this is that whole Liz O'Hara
Okay, go
thing.
for it.
So it's Liz O'Hara, Liz Perlin O'Hara. I wrote both.
Both.
It's
All
one word,
right.
no punctuation. It's Lizohra, Lizperlinohra, like that. I'm also on Etsy, vibrationsinlight.etsy.com.
Beautiful. Absolutely.
I didn't need to spell it out, but I just
I'll put it in the show notes, but it's always good to hear it because sometimes I mispronounce, or maybe I would have thought to put the apostrophe between the O and the Hera. So I'm glad you spelt it out. It's
yeah.
perfect. It's just perfect. Yes.
So, time for one question. I don't want to put
Of
you on the
course.
spot, but there's
Go ahead.
you said, and I feel like your wealth of knowledge might help me with this. Periodically, I get this phrase, and it was one of my early messages, and it is definitely galactic. And it is this: the light is faster than the water. And so that's meant a couple different things to me. Like, I think I know what that means, but I was curious, just given sort of your breadth of knowledge, if that means anything to you.
The first thing that comes through to me with that phrase, the light is faster than the water. Several things. If you want to look at it just straight science, the energy with which light can travel will be faster than the energy with which water is capable of traveling, just by the physics of it. The other thing that I feel come through is water is certainly connected to our emotions and our movement of our emotions. It's very commonly associated with the emotional realm of things. Light is often associated with direct link connection to the divine. So it almost says to me, if you want to find your path home, if you want to get back to your essence, lean into the light, to the divine messaging that's meant for you, and it will come through and
I
travel
love that.
a little bit faster than water. And if you think about, so have you ever been, oh, I don't know, you got to be careful what body of water you open your eyeballs in, because if it's salty, that's no go. But have you ever like
Mm.
opened your eyes underwater, or seen photographs even where sun has come through and it hits the body of water and then it goes down through the water and it sort of spreads out, I'm going to say, like the beam of light is not as clear cut below water as it is above water. So that's because when it goes through the water, part of that is a perceptual thing, but part of that is the expression of the energy through the water gets a little bit distorted because it now hits another waveform energy, which is the water. And so the two pieces don't quite travel at the same speed. Does that make
Yeah,
sense? Yeah.
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it also like bends sometimes, right?
And it bends, correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of it's really another way of kind of saying to be both, to be both spiritual, up divine
Mm.
universe, and more earthly with the water. So it's a sort of a connection of grounding and spiritual to me. It's like a little bit of both.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing it differently, like because I'm sort of seeing it in the energy in my mind's eye a little bit differently now after you're saying that. I
Mm,
appreciate that so
of course. I mean, that's just my perspective. You're getting my filter, which may not be everybody else's filter, but that's fine.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very interesting message coming through for you. Very interesting. Yeah. It kind of really says to me, if you want to work your way through all of this, the emotions that swim, the emotions that flow, both good, both bad, looking up, be more spiritually, connecting more to the messages of universe, of the divine, brings the clarity and the speed with which you will receive those messages a little bit quicker. Again,
And
receptivity, open. Yeah.
and I've been thinking, because this is part of what I perceived it to mean, but when you were talking also, like I love that like what's my spiritual sort of state with my emotional state, and how can I align those, on the
Yeah.
context.
I mean, if you think about it, we as humans have five senses. Your soul has more, but your humanness has five senses. So if you think about, what do people do and how do we take care and nurture the energy through to our body and work on our emotional healing within our body somatically, we go to sound healing, so you're using your hearing. We use light therapy, whether that's through a healer as yourself or people who do, for example, red light therapy on my, I don't know, sore on my leg or whatever. We do visualization techniques to help re-regulate and bring our nervous system into place. There's many people who do water therapy to help either heal physically and or again use to create a better nervous regulation state. We do talk therapy. So again, we use all of our senses. We go and have body work done. Again, why? Because there's a connection between the energetic and the physical to move the energy that's either stagnated or stuck or whatever the thing may be, whatever you want to call that. And so it's interesting that the messaging comes, the energetic messaging comes to us as humans in ways that humans can start to integrate so they can hear the
Mhm.
messages. And
Mhm.
there's no mistake about that. Like
Yeah.
that's not an obscure random design. So, yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating,
Right.
isn't it? I'm gonna put all of this in the show notes.